we're looking at what does my life look like in the next decade or 2 decades or 3 or 4 decades.
And if I can stay connected to the future version of myself that I want, and then understand how today Amy will translate to tomorrow Amy. Welcome to the Strength Changes Everything podcast, where we introduce you to the information, latest research, and tools that will enable you to live a strong, healthy life. On this podcast, we will also answer your questions about strength, health, and well-being. I'm Amy Hudson. I own and operate 3 exercise coach studios. My co-hosts are Brian Sagan, co-founder and CEO of The Exercise Coach, and Dr. James Fisher, leading researcher in evidence-based strength training. And now for today's episode. Today's episode is all about making 2025 your healthiest year yet. It is the new year, and new year always brings about thoughts about resolutions. For a lot of people, we think about new goals we might have for ourselves. And because this podcast is about health and strength and fitness and wellness, we're going to specifically talk in this episode about how to make 2025 your healthiest year. We're going to talk first about what health looks like and what are the areas we should consider when thinking about health. We're going to talk about goal setting. We'll talk about should we set goals? How should we think about setting them? And finally, we're going to talk about our brain and how our brain's functionality might impact our proclivity to succeed with our goals. It's going to be a really interesting episode today, so you're going to want to listen to the entire episode all the way through to the end to get the most out of this conversation. I'm here with Dr. James Fisher, and Happy New Year, Dr. James.
Happy New Year to you, Amy.
Awesome. I'm so excited to talk about this. So let's jump in. And, we're talking about how to make 2025 our healthiest year. But when we think about health, really, what are areas of health we want to be considering when even thinking about setting goals or identifying where we are at in areas of our life? What are the areas we should consider?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I think a lot of people probably already have in mind what their individual or specific goals might be. Typically, people look at changing their exercise habits or increasing their exercise habits, maybe improving their sleep or their sleep duration or quality of sleep. Maybe learning a new task or something related to their brain or their cognition or cognitive function. There may be social or spiritual goals as well. So people will have a lot of individual goals based on their own lifestyle and so forth.
So it's important just to remember that health is not only one area. So it's important to evaluate how you're doing in various areas so you can consider maybe you're strong in one area, but this other area is not so good. And so this helps us to set a framework for what we want to work on and why we're focusing on that area. So exactly, really helpful to set that scene. Okay, so Dr. Fisher, we're going to talk a lot about this, goal setting. So first of all, should we set goals?
I think that's the question, isn't it? I think it's really important to set goals. I think it's really important for our human evolution to continue to learn and to continue to evolve and improve ourselves. I think everybody has this maybe virtuous idea of, I want to be the best version of me that I can be. But I think we sometimes get a bit laid up by what the goals are. So maybe it's I want to drop 10 pounds or I want to add 5 pounds of muscle or I want to learn how to juggle or something. And it becomes a very objective, a very quantifiable task. And that's great. There's no problem with that. But I think that we should probably look at goals a little bit differently. And I try to think about goals as being as habits, as being process driven rather than outcome driven. When I've coached basketball in the past, we talk about these are the things that we can control. So control the controllables rather than look solely at the outcome. If you're only focused on what the outcome is, then once you've achieved it, then that's success. And then where do you go? But if you don't achieve it, then it's very easy to take a negative opinion of yourself. So if you're more focused on the process and the day-to-day, then it's far easier to kind of get that enjoyment and that satisfaction from the goals that you're setting.
Do you think that's why some people resist setting goals in the first place? Is the fear of failing and having to deal with that failure?
Yeah, that might well be. That might well be the case. I think that uh, there's a lot of different acronyms about how to set goals. A lot of people may be familiar with SMART goals being specific, measurable, realistic, timely, and things like that. And there's a lot of ways. Psychologists have done a great job of providing a number of different acronyms. There's then smarter goals and so forth. Psychologists have done a great job to kind of provide ways to set goals, but ultimately it's about what do we really want to achieve? And I mean, we're going to talk about this in a minute. We'll get into some sort of processes, but there's an idea from sort of Stephen Covey's Seven Habits of Highly Effective People of beginning with the end in mind. And I really like the idea of, okay, what are my later years going to look like? How my 80s or my 90s going to be? Am I going to be able to get up and down off the floor and play with my grandkids, and so forth? And I think that that's not something that I can determine now. It's something that if I have a good process throughout the next years of my life, or the successive years of my life, then I'm able to achieve those goals later in life. Um, it's difficult because obviously people will have shorter term and longer term goals.
Absolutely. But I like that idea because thinking about what you want for yourself long term helps to make clear what behaviors need to happen now in order for that to be true. And so, if we consider what do I want for myself, whether that's a year from today, whether that's 5 years from today, or whether it's 25 years from today, it really helps to crystallize the daily behaviors and habits that need to be in place right now in order for that to be the case. The truth is that if we don't put any thought into life, it's just too easy to live on default mode, which for most of us is going to be the path of least resistance. It's going to be more instant gratification choices, which we all know is human nature. And so giving a little thought to these right now helps to frame what needs to happen. So,
Absolutely. I also think it's important to remember that when we talk about goals and goal setting, people do have a fear of failure maybe, or they only set goals that are attainable. And later on, we're going to talk about some of the neurophysiology around our brain and around setting goals and around learning. But there's a real analogy between goal setting and learning. And one of the things that the research is very clear on is that when you're learning a new task, you should be successful probably about 85% of the time. So if I make the analogy to coaching basketball, when I coach basketball players, then they should be successful in about 85% of the drills, or about 85% of the time. But about 10 to 15% of the time, they should be unsuccessful. They should be challenged. That's how they accomplish that next level, and then the next level, and so forth. And it's the same really with when we set goals. If we set a goal that you can achieve 100% of the time, then it's not really a challenge. It's not really gonna do anything for you. It's not really putting you outside of your comfort zone or improving you. So it should be around 85. You should be failing about 10 to 15% of the time, and that's okay. It's okay if you plan to do certain workouts and then you miss a workout, or you plan to eat certain foods and then you have a bad meal. And I know you have some thoughts around this relating back to some literature you've read, Amy.
yes, one book on this topic that I've read and some of my coaches have read actually at our studios is Atomic Habits by James Clear. And one point he makes in here is to get rid of the all or nothing mindset. So that is relevant to what you were just saying about, if I'm trying to eat healthier, I grab a bag of potato chips one day. The temptation is mentally to say, all right, well, I might as well give up eating healthy now since I messed up this one time. All or nothing mindset is very easy to get into because especially with health and fitness, it's too easy to say, okay, well, if I want to get healthier, that means I'm going to need to get a gym membership and go 5 days a week for 1 hour. I'm going to have to overhaul my nutrition completely. I'm going to have to be perfect. I'm going to have to cut out alcohol. I'm going to have to cut out this. I'm going to have to cut out that. And that is a lot to undertake at once, right? And so, again, human nature is unless I can do all of that, it's not worth me trying at all. And so, if we can get rid of that all or nothing mindset and make actionable, doable daily habits and choices without perfectionism, it really is going to set us up for more success. So that's another tip I really like from Atomic Habits.
Yeah, awesome, awesome. I think if I go back to the 7 habits of highly effective people, then I think that we could talk about one of the habits, the way it's written, is called seeking to understand before being understood. And the way I pitch this in terms of goal setting is an awareness of the obstacles that we might have. So most people already have reasons why they don't maybe go to the gym or they don't work out as regularly as they'd like to. And it might be time, or it might be, fear of what a workout looks like, or things like that. But sometimes if it's nutritional habits or if it's sleep habits, are we aware of the obstacles that might prevent us from achieving those goals? So if I set the goal of I want to get 8 to 9 hours of sleep every night, and one of the steps to doing that is to switch off my phone, my mobile phone, at 10 p.m., then I need to maybe set boundaries of when I'm gonna last look at emails, or it might be when telling my friends or telling family members, they can contact me in an emergency, but my phone's going to be switched off after a certain time, or things like that. So it's an awareness to these barriers that are going to exist. It might be nutritional habits. So if I decide that I want to increase my protein intake because I want to add muscle. Well, that's great. But the protein part of it is far easier to control because I can talk to my family members about my nutritional habits. Or if I want to eat healthier, eat more fruit and vegetables. Well, I have a 7-year-old son and I want him to eat more fruit and vegetables. So if he sees me doing it, then I can talk with him about doing it. And then if he reaches for a chocolate bar or a bag of potato chips, then I'm not tempted to kind of follow suit with that. I can say, hey, we're trying to eat healthy together, and we kind of get people on board. So we kind of are aware of those barriers that might preclude us from achieving our goals, um, and, uh, and help us to achieve them.
I love that one. A couple comments about that is that at the exercise coach every year, a couple times a year, we participating locations offer a challenge, a 30-day metabolic comeback challenge. We promote a whole food approach to nutrition, trying to eat real food, trying to pair whole real food eating, lower sugar, anti-inflammatory eating with workouts twice a week, strength training workouts in order to improve digestive health, decrease inflammation, regulate blood sugar. It really helps people to achieve their goals of dropping body fat while maintaining or adding muscle mass, which helps us to be metabolically healthier. And during these 30-day challenges, we really are choosing only the whole foods, right? So that means we're eliminating some things that are not really beneficial for us during those 30 days. And something we do with clients is we say, what what do you foresee as being an obstacle? We are really only trying to eat these foods. And so what do you foresee as being a challenge for you eating this way? And many times people will say, I work, so I need to figure out something to bring to work, or lunches are going to be challenging, or my I'm too busy at night with my kids' activities, and so I don't have enough time to really prepare healthy choices. And so in that case, they're going to be thinking about meal prepping more or finding solutions around that so they can build healthy meals around things that they've already prepared. But without that step, what's going to happen? They're going to be in that situation and stuck, right? And desperate and make decisions that they wouldn't otherwise make. When it comes to exercise, I'm just going to throw this in there. If you're a person who knows that time is a barrier for you when it comes to exercise and you don't have 15 hours a week, you might want to consider a brief strength training program that only takes 2 20-minute workouts a week, course, my favorite one is the exercise coach. Why would you sign up for something that is going to cost you, 20 hours of time in order to get the results that you're looking for when you can achieve that in 40 minutes a week? So, just something to consider when you think about your own self and what obstacles you might have in achieving your fitness and wellness goals.
I think you're absolutely right, Amy. And one of the things that links back to is just setting unrealistic goals. It's the idea that 2025 is going to be my best year. I'm going to get healthy, but I'm going to try and do it all in January and then
Mm,
sustain it through the next 11 months. Well, that's not going to happen. First of all, I'm not going to achieve it in January. And second of all, even if I do, I'm just not going to sustain it through 11 months. Because if I manage to go to the gym every day through January and I somehow drop 5 pounds or 10 pounds or reach my target weight, well, my bad habits are going to come back in and I'm going to put it all back on. So, the idea of looking at what do I need to do? Okay, I can manage 2 workouts a week, or I can manage this nutritional program, or I can manage getting this amount of sleep. It is absolutely key. Setting realistic goals is genuinely, a really positive way to go with this. A really important approach to this.
absolutely. One other tip I wanted to mention is to connect to your why. When you think about being a healthier you in 2025, why do you want that? Is it going to be because I want to have more energy so I can perform better at work? I want to be a better parent. I want to be a better spouse. I want to be a better leader, right? Why do you want what you want? And being able to have that emotional connection to your goal is really going to help. I think studies show, and Dr. Fisher, you might even speak to this in a second, that having that emotional connection to a desired outcome makes it a lot more likely that you're going to take action for that desired outcome. Is that true?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So we tend to think of this in terms of two ways. There's what we call value information. So what value does doing or achieving something have, and then action, and then our action really is determined on was the value high enough for me to act on it. And when I talk about, I mentioned earlier about being process driven. So I'm kind of what I call playing the long game. We're looking at what does my life look like in the next decade or 2 decades or 3 or 4 decades. Um, and those are the things that I'm motivated by. And it's really difficult to see that tomorrow because I'm aging and I know that there's going to be a natural product of aging through my health. But what I don't see is all the ill health that I don't get because of my
Mhm,
good, healthy habits. So
mhm,
we're kind of like saying, oh, you're not going to see the negative. So, so, and it's easy for people not to say, or it's easy for people to say, oh, well, how am I going to act on something that I can't see? And you say, well, that's you're exactly right. But look around you. Look at the way people do put on weight in their 70s or their 80s. Look at 80-year-old males and females who are frail, who have had cognitive decline, who are maybe obese, who have cardiovascular disease, who have a number of medical conditions, and look at your life and say, I don't want to have those things. I don't want to go down that path. I want to make my own. I want to be the master of my own fate, and I want to create a different future for myself. Because there are certainly people of those age groups who have a very healthy life and a high quality of life because of the lifestyle decisions they've made in their earlier decades. So playing the long game is really important. And of course, I think most people would say there's a high value to a good quality of life as we age, and those are the actions that we want to take on it now. Shall I jump into some of the neurophysiology around this, Amy? Or
Yes, I'd love to hear this because this is very unique to think about the way our brain function may impact our proclivity to succeed or fail.
yeah, so when we talk about the brain is really closely linked to learning. We said this earlier about this kind of 85% success rate, or more importantly, the 10 to 15% failure rate. And there's kind of four key parts of the brain that we talk about. The first of which is the amygdala. And that's often talked about in terms of fear. But fear is a big motivator, and it might be an underlying motivator for some of our habits. So it might be social elements. If I am overweight, or if I don't exercise, and a lot of my social group do exercise, and so forth. It might be fear of ill health, of other comorbidities, and so forth. We've got our basal ganglia, which is kind of like our go no go switch, is the way it's often described. Am I gonna go and get that snack, that unhealthy snack, that bag of candy, or am I gonna not go and get it? And if I don't go and get it, am I gonna go and get a bag of carrot sticks instead, or a bag of rice crackers, or something slightly healthier instead? We've then got a couple of parts of our prefrontal cortex. So there's a part that's responsible for kind of planning and some decision making, and that's the lateral prefrontal cortex. And then we've got the orbital frontal cortex, excuse me, that's linked to kind of emotion and emotional attachment to things. And ultimately, our brain is kind of following this neurological process every time we learn something, or every time we try and set goals, about how we value that goal, how we act on that goal, our emotional attachment to it, and so forth. And then the other key thing that people have probably heard about is the term dopamine. So dopamine is the neurotransmitter that plays a key role in goal setting and achievement. And actually, it's the dopamine release that we love, that's our satisfaction and our productivity. So when we achieve our goals, it's our kind of our dopamine release that kind of says, "Hey, that's success. That's how that looks." So it's really interesting to think about how our brain and how our neurochemistry interacts with kind of our uh, physical and psychological behavior around goals and goal setting.
That is super interesting. So, is it possible to retrain our brain to use that prefrontal cortex to make smart decisions, logical, good decisions for ourselves, and then learn how to receive a reward, that dopamine rush, from the actually positive habits?
Absolutely. And that's the key thing about our brain. We talk about what's called neuroplasticity. And that's that we have a brain that we can model and remodel over time. So we can create habits. We don't have to be led by certain parts of our brain. The more we understand about it, the more we can be led by other parts of our brain. So instead of just being this kind of emotional animal, we talk about that. There's a book that talked about the human being as like a chimp. And our inner chimp, where we're led by kind of parts of our brain that are very emotional, and we just act on those things. And then there's other parts where we're led by planning and process, and we're kind of calm and controlled, and we make smart decisions. And some of that, to some extent, links back to exercise. Um, we talk about exercise being good for us because we want to exercise that part of the brain that makes irrational decisions. But we also have decision fatigue. So the reason that we might be prone to pouring a glass of scotch, or opening a beer or a bottle of wine in the evening and ordering takeout, is because it's easy. Because at the end of the day, I'm exhausted from a long day of recorded podcasts, and all the other things that I do, all the other exciting things that I do that I won't talk about right now. But I'm tired, I'm fatigued. So what am I going to do? Oh, I'm going to sit down, and I'm going to switch off, and I'm going to make some bad decisions. But actually, if we kind of plan for those decisions, then we can put ourselves in a much better position. But certainly, our brain allows for that neuroplasticity to retrain it to make good decisions and attach to the right things.
I know for myself, when I've learned more about a topic, especially with health, nutrition, for example, it really does light up that prefrontal cortex for me, and I get motivated when I know better. I can do better. And I've said that before on this podcast, is learning about nutrition and what causes inflammation, for example, and deciding to myself, I don't really want that for myself. What does that mean? What does that mean as far as the decisions I want to make today? And can I connect the dots between the decisions I'm going to make And at first it is harder, right? It is harder because our default mode wants what it wants. And maybe it's chocolate, for example, on a given day. But then there's something else, there's a greater desire there that comes from the knowledge that I've gained about what's best. And if I can connect to that and stay connected to that, and if I can stay connected to the future version of myself that I want, and then understand how today, Amy, will translate to tomorrow, Amy, that I want, that is a powerful mental exercise to do to help your future self out. So I don't know if that helps anybody else, but that has helped me before.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And I think another key thing that people might do with their goals, or certainly their process goals, are to verbalize them and to say them out loud to other people, to try and create a degree of accountability to them. If we tell our partners, if we tell our family, I'm gonna go to the gym. I'm gonna try and go to the gym twice a week, every week for the next year. That's not an outcome goal until the end of the year. So I've got 12 months where that's a process. And if I miss a week, then hopefully the people I've verbalized that to will make me accountable. Or if nothing else, I will feel the stigma of not having gone whenever
Mm,
I'm around those people. So I think that verbalizing goals can be a really good thing to do. But like I said, I think it's really important that they're process driven as well.
yes, and nothing is more procedural in my mind than planning. So, I mean, I'm looking at this list that we've talked about with areas of our health when it comes to sleep, when it comes to exercise, when it comes to nutrition. A lot of these can be boiled down into, like we talked about, daily behaviors, daily procedures, the process that leads to the result that we want eventually, right? And so, how can we plan for success? A lot of these is scheduling it in. Schedule what I'm going to eat, schedule when I'm going to work out, what time I'm going to bed, when I'm going to hang out with a friend. And sometimes just the act of making a plan for your week um, is the difference maker. And so that's another, very helpful tip is that plan for success.
Absolutely. Love it. And of course, one of the habits that everybody listening should have is to tune into this podcast every week, and we'll help to keep you accountable for your goals.
Absolutely. It's your weekly shot of dopamine when it comes to strength and health motivation. All right. Well, we wish everybody listening a very happy, healthy 2025. We will see you next week on the podcast. And remember, strength changes everything. Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. Make sure you follow the show on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts so that you never miss another episode. You can find out more information about this episode or connect with the show at strengthchangeseverything.com. Join us next week for another episode. Here's to you and your best health.